June 6, 2015. Clinton Correctional Facility in Dannemora, New York. At morning count, guards made a chilling discovery. 2 cells empty, the men who slept in them gone. No alarms, no witnesses, just silence, and 2 gaping holes where convicted killers had once been locked away. Their names? Richard Matt and David Sweat, both serving life sentences, both dangerous, both vanished. What followed would become one of the most shocking prison breaks in U.S. history, and the largest manhunt New York State had ever seen. But the story of the escape didn't begin with power tools or tunnels. It began with trust, misplaced trust, and the slow, quiet manipulation of people on the inside. This is the escape at Dannemora. Because deep below those prison bunks, something was happening nobody could see. Richard Matt was no ordinary inmate. A career criminal with a violent past, Matt was known for his charm as much as his brutality. In 1997, he kidnapped and murdered his former boss, dismembering him before fleeing to Mexico. David Sweat, by contrast, was younger. In 2002, at just 22 years old, he was convicted of murdering a sheriff's deputy in cold blood after a burglary. Sentenced to life without parole, Sweat carried a reputation of cunning intelligence and patience. Both men were placed in Clinton Correctional Facility, one of the toughest prisons in America, but the walls weren't enough to contain their ambition. Because inside Dannemora, survival wasn't just about strength, it was about manipulation. Clinton Correctional was nicknamed Little Siberia. Bitter winters, isolated location, nearly 3,000 inmates. It was supposed to be escape-proof. But for men like Matt and Sweat, the prison was not a fortress. It was an opportunity. Both men were assigned jobs inside Clinton. Matt, the artist, painting portraits of guards, ingratiating himself with staff. Sweat, the detail-oriented worker, often praised for his discipline and reliability. It was here, in the prison tailor shop, that they met Joyce Mitchell, a civilian employee. Married, middle-aged, seemingly ordinary. But for Matt and Sweat, she would become the key. What Joyce didn't know was that she wasn't just sewing uniforms. She was stitching together the first threads of an escape plan. Joyce Mitchell, known as Tilly to friends, was responsible for supervising inmates in the prison tailor shop. Over time, her relationship with both Matt and Sweat blurred lines that should never be crossed. Matt, charismatic and manipulative, showered her with attention. Sweat, calculating and quiet, earned her trust. Together, they played a psychological game, turning kindness into loyalty and loyalty into complicity. It started small. Extra food, flirtations. Then came favors, smuggled tools, hidden packages. What neither Joyce nor the guards realized was that every act, every smile, every whispered conversation was part of a puzzle that would end with 2 killers crawling beneath the prison walls. And when the pieces finally connected, Clinton's reputation as escape-proof would crumble. Sweat studied the prison like an engineer. Maps, maintenance routes, steam pipes, every sound, every shift change, every blind spot in the system. Matt used charm. Sweat used calculation. Together, they built a plan bold enough to rival Hollywood. The escape would require tools. And tools they could not get without help. Joyce Mitchell, blinded by infatuation, agreed to smuggle in contraband. Hacksaw blades hidden in frozen hamburger meat. Screwdrivers, drill bits, everything they needed to dig, cut, and carve their way out. And beneath their cells, hidden from view, the work began. For nearly 6 months, the prison itself was being cut open from within, and nobody noticed. Night after night, the sound of scraping steel echoed below Clinton. Matt and Sweat cut through steel walls, slipped into utility tunnels, and carved a secret pathway. When guards came by, they were asleep in their bunks. When morning count happened, everything looked normal. But below, the tunnel grew longer. It wasn't just an escape route. It was a masterpiece of patience, planning, and manipulation. And the day was coming when the walls of Dannemora would be breached. The escape at Dannemora wasn't just about tools and tunnels. It was about trust. Trust between prisoners and staff. Trust that rules would be followed. Trust that boundaries wouldn't be crossed. When trust collapses, systems fail. And at Clinton Correctional, that collapse revealed a truth as dark as the tunnels themselves. Even the strongest walls can be broken, not by force, but by human weakness. Matt and Sweat exploited loneliness, kindness, and routine. Their escape was as much a psychological heist as it was a physical one, and it left an entire town and an entire nation asking, how could this happen? Behind the walls of Clinton Correctional Facility, escape wasn't just built with steel and sweat, it was stitched together in plain sight. The prison tailor shop, rows of sewing machines, inmates repairing uniforms, a place that looked ordinary, safe, even productive. But for Richard, Matt, and David Sweat, it was their workshop of deception. And at the center of it all, Joyce Mitchell, a civilian employee trusted by the state, a wife, a mother, but also a woman drawn into a dangerous web of manipulation. This was where boundaries shattered, where a friendship became an affair, and an affair became a conspiracy. And it was here where the prison's greatest secret was quietly being smuggled in. Because what entered Clinton's tailor shop was not just fabric, it was freedom. To understand the escape, you must understand Joyce Mitchell. Known as Tilly by family and friends, Joyce was a lifelong resident of Dannemora. Outwardly, she lived a simple, quiet life. Married to Lyle Mitchell, another corrections employee. Comfortable, stable, ordinary. But prison life has a way of bending ordinary into something dangerous. Day after day, Mitchell supervised inmates in the tailor shop. Day after day, she spoke with men who had nothing but time and a hunger for attention. Richard Matt saw his opportunity. Charming, artistic, a skilled manipulator. He painted her portraits, complimented her, made her feel seen in ways her marriage no longer did. David Sweat, younger and colder, approached differently. He gained her trust, made her feel essential. 2 killers, 1 woman, and a dangerous triangle forming inside prison walls. And it was only a matter of time before trust turned into betrayal. It started small, a conversation too long, a joke too personal, then a touch on the arm, a kiss in the closet, whispered promises. Prison rules were clear. No inappropriate relationships with inmates. But the walls of Clinton couldn't guard against loneliness. And Joyce Mitchell crossed the line. Once Matt and Sweat knew she was compromised, the plan shifted. Mitchell became their mule. She smuggled hacksaw blades hidden in frozen hamburger meat, smuggled bits of metal, small tools that seemed harmless in her bag, but inside, they were weapons against steel. Every delivery brought the killers one step closer to freedom. And Joyce? She was being drawn deeper into a conspiracy she couldn't control. What she didn't know was that these small favors would soon turn into a life-or-death request. In their whispered talks, Matt and Sweat promised Mitchell a future. They spoke of running away together, a life far from Dannemora. But freedom required more than tools. It required eliminating an obstacle. According to investigators, Matt pressured Joyce to help kill her husband, Lyle. They spoke of plans to drug him, to silence him forever. Joyce admitted later she brought pills, but in the end, she didn't go through with it. Still, the thought lingered. 2 killers, 1 woman, a plot to murder her husband. And in her heart, Joyce knew she was already in too deep. But by then, the tunnel beneath Clinton was already taking shape. David Sweat was the engineer. He mapped the prison's guts, steam pipes, catwalks, manholes. He studied guard rotations like clockwork. Each night, after lights out, Sweat and Matt worked in silence. Hacksaw blades against steel, pieces of metal hidden in their cells, small holes widening into passages. They used dummies in their beds, heads made of cloth, covered in hair from the barber shop, to fool night checks. And with every cut, every crawl, every inch of pipe explored, Clinton Correctional became less a fortress and more a cage waiting to be broken. But there was a problem. The tunnel ended beneath the prison's walls. To break free, they needed help on the outside. And Joyce Mitchell would have to choose, loyalty to her husband or loyalty to killers. Mitchell continued smuggling. Hacksaw blades hidden inside hamburger meat, small screwdrivers, even chisels. She gave Matt and Sweat everything they needed to carve their way out of Clinton. It was risky. If a single package had been opened by a guard, the plan would have collapsed. But prison routine was predictable. Guards trusted her, and Mitchell's packages passed through without question. Matt and Sweat were now armed with a secret arsenal. The tunnel beneath Clinton was no longer just a pipe dream. It was becoming an exit, and soon that exit would lead straight into the night. The escape at Dannemora was never just about walls. It was about boundaries, personal, professional, emotional. For Joyce Mitchell, the line between prison worker and prisoner dissolved. What began as harmless conversation became an affair. What began as kindness became complicity. It's a story as old as time. People underestimate the power of manipulation. They believe they are in control until it's too late. Matt and Sweat didn't escape through walls. They escaped through people, through trust, through a system that assumed its workers were unbreakable. But no wall is stronger than human weakness, and no rule book can account for a lonely heart. June 5th, 2015. Night falls over Clinton Correctional Facility. The air is heavy, the prison quiet. In the cells of Richard, Matt, and David Sweat, dummies lie under blankets, faces shaped with hair from the barbershop, bodies padded with clothes. Guards make their rounds. Flashlights sweep across still forms. Nothing seems unusual. But beneath those bunks, the secret world is opening. For months, Matt and Sweat have sawed through steel, tunneled through darkness, and cut through the very bones of Clinton. And now, the final night has come. This is the moment everything will either succeed or collapse. Two killers, one tunnel, one chance to vanish into the night. And with a final turn of the hacksaw, the prison walls gave way. Every detail mattered. Sweat, meticulous as always, checked her out again. The pipe, the crawl space, the manhole that would lead them beyond the prison walls. Matt, the artist of charm, kept spirits high. Together, they rehearsed the escape in silence. The dummies in their bunks bought them precious hours. The tools smuggled in by Joyce Mitchell had already cut their path. And now, everything depended on one final crawl. For the inmates of Clinton, it was just another night. For Matt and Sweat, it was the end of their cage. But what nobody knew was that the plan wasn't just escape. It was supposed to include Joyce Mitchell, waiting outside with a getaway car. Except Joyce got cold feet. And in that hesitation, fate changed everything. In her confession later, Joyce Mitchell admitted she was supposed to meet Matt and Sweat that night. She was supposed to drive them to safety. But at the last moment, panic took hold. She felt sick, overwhelmed, terrified of the consequences. Instead of driving to the prison, she checked herself into a hospital. The killers would be on their own. Still, Mitchell's role was complete. She had smuggled the tools. She had given them access. Now, the escape rested on Matt and Sweat's shoulders alone. And as the prison snored in darkness, they crawled into the shadows. The tunnel beneath Clinton was waiting, but no one knew if it would actually lead to freedom. The men slipped beneath their bunks and into the narrow crawl space. Pipes dripped, metal groaned. Every movement risked noise that could expose them. They navigated through catwalks and tunnels, guided by months of memory. Their tools carved open steel, their hands blistered but steady. At one point, they cut into a massive pipe, climbing through the hollow steel like rats in a maze. Sweat's calculations had been precise. Every cut brought them closer to the outer wall. Hours passed. Guards above walked their rounds, oblivious, and in the silence of the tunnels, freedom grew closer with every inch, until finally they reached the outer wall. A steel grate separated them from the outside world, and with the last strokes of their hacksaw, the grate fell away. When Matt and Sweat emerged, the prison walls were behind them, and the largest manhunt in New York's history was about to begin. They pushed open a manhole cover just outside the prison perimeter. Steam rose into the night. The cold Adirondack air filled their lungs. For the first time in years, Richard, Matt, and David Sweat were free. Behind them, Clinton Correctional remained silent. The guards had no idea two of their most dangerous inmates were gone. It would be hours before morning count revealed the truth, hours that gave the fugitives a head start. But the outside world was not as simple as they imagined. Cold forests, remote towns, no car waiting, no easy way out. Freedom, it turned out, came with its own prison, survival.
Just keep moving.
And when the sun rose over Dannemora, the alarm would sound. Prisons are designed to control. Every door locked, every movement watched, every day predictable. But Matt and Sweat showed how fragile control can be. With patience, charm, and manipulation, they turned the prison against itself. The escape was more than just a tunnel. It was a failure of human systems. Guards grew complacent. Workers grew attached. Boundaries dissolved. And in that weakness, control slipped into chaos. The night Matt and Sweat crawled into the tunnels. Clinton Correctional wasn't a maximum security prison. It was a stage. And the actors who played their roles so well had fooled the system entirely. June 6, 2015. Morning count at Clinton Correctional Facility. Guards moved cell to cell, their voices echoing through the stone halls. But when they reached cells 23 and 24, something was wrong. The bunks were occupied, or so it seemed. Blankets pulled high, faces turned away. But when the guards pulled back the covers, their blood ran cold. Dummies, heads stuffed with cloth, hair glued on, bodies that weren't real. And the men who should have been there, killers Richard Matt and David Sweat, were gone. No alarms, no struggle, no trace. The impossible had happened. Clinton, the fortress, had been breached. And in that instant, the largest manhunt in New York State history began. What the guards found next would shake the entire country. Word spread like wildfire. The governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, rushed to Dannemora. Reporters swarmed the prison gates. Families in nearby towns locked their doors. The unthinkable had happened. 2 convicted murderers were loose in the Adirondacks. Governor Cuomo toured the escape route himself. He walked the same tunnels Matt and Sweat crawled through, emerging from a manhole just outside the walls. It was surreal, something out of a movie, only this wasn't fiction. The reality was chilling. Matt and Sweat had nearly 24 hours head start. They could be anywhere. And as panic set in, the manhunt began. But this was no ordinary search. It was a war in the woods. Over 1,000 officers were deployed. State troopers, U.S. Marshals, FBI agents. Helicopters circled overhead. Canines tracked scents through the forest. Roadblocks went up. Homes were searched. Entire communities placed under lockdown. For days, the woods echoed with the sound of boots, dogs, and choppers. But Matt and Sweat had vanished. They knew the wilderness. They knew patience. And with no car, no phones, and no money, they relied on instinct to stay ahead. Each day without capture raised tension higher. Each night, rumors spread. The killers were hiding in barns and cabins, maybe even inside homes of unsuspecting families. Dannemora was no longer just a prison town. It was a hunting ground. And the hunters weren't always sure who was in control. Every sound in the woods became a threat. Every shadow, a possibility. There were sightings, footprints, broken branches. But each lead seemed to vanish into nothing. Officers raided cabins only to find them empty. Helicopters spotted movement that turned out to be deer. Entire nights were spent chasing whispers. Frustration grew. The killers were out there, somewhere, watching, waiting. And then came the break investigators dreaded. Signs that Matt and Sweat had stolen food and supplies. They were not just surviving, they were thriving. And the manhunt was about to turn deadly. Richard Matt was a killer who once dismembered his boss. David Sweat had executed a sheriff's deputy. These were not men running for freedom. These were predators, cornered animals with nothing to lose. The state warned residents, do not approach, do not engage. If you see them, call police immediately. But fear alone couldn't stop the spread of rumors. In every diner, every gas station, people whispered, what if they're here? And in the Adirondack woods, Matt and Sweat moved silently, always just beyond the search grid. Until one night, a gunshot shattered the silence. The escape, didn't just shake Clinton Correctional. It shook the very fabric of the community. Children stayed home from school. Families slept with weapons beside their beds. Farmers carried rifles into their fields. Fear spread like wildfire. Not just fear of Matt and Sweat, but fear of the system itself. If two convicted killers could walk out of a maximum security prison, what else was possible? It was a question no one in Dannemora wanted to ask, but it was one they could no longer ignore. June 20th, 2015, 2 weeks since the escape. The Adirondack forest was alive with tension, boots crunching on leaves, helicopters circling above, radios crackling with static. And then the gunshot. It tore through the silence. Officers froze. Had they just stumbled upon the fugitives? The manhunt that had dragged through endless false leads had suddenly turned lethal. And within hours, Richard Matt, the mastermind, the manipulator, the killer, would never walk again. But David Sweat, he was still out there, and more dangerous than ever. What led to Matt's violent end would reveal just how desperate the fugitives had become. By the third week of the manhunt, fear had become routine in northern New York. Roads were blocked by police. Homes were searched door to door. Families carried shotguns just to walk their land. And yet, Matt and Sweat had evaded every trap. They stole food, left behind makeshift camps, even broke into cabins. The fugitives were starving, dehydrated, and exhausted, but alive. Each time officers closed in, the killers slipped through cracks. But hunger makes men reckless, and it was hunger that gave them away. A sound in the forest tipped the balance. On the evening of June 19th, reports came in from Malone, New York, a gunshot heard in the forest. At first, it seemed like another false lead, but investigators pushed forward. What they didn't know, Richard Matt had stolen liquor from a cabin. He was drunk, reckless, his judgment fading. While Sweat urged caution, Matt grew loud. He fired his shotgun into the trees. He laughed in the darkness. But that single shot, echoing through the woods, became his death sentence. Because the New York State Police were already closing in. And when they found him, Richard Matt was still holding his weapon. June 26, 2015. After 22 days on the run, Richard Matt was spotted near Malone. An officer raised his rifle, sighted through the trees, and fired. Matt staggered. The shot ripped through his head. He collapsed into the brush. The man who had manipulated guards, charmed his way through prison walls, and masterminded an impossible escape was gone in an instant. Richard Matt, 49 years old, declared dead on scene. For the first time since the breakout, the people of Dannemora exhaled. But relief came with a bitter truth. David Sweat was still alive, and now he was running alone. And Sweat wasn't ready to give up. With Matt gone, the manhunt narrowed. David Sweat, younger, faster, more disciplined, became the sole focus. But Sweat knew what Matt didn't. Silence was survival. He ditched his partner's reckless habits. He moved at night, hid during the day, ate little, drank less. For 2 more days, he remained a ghost in the forest. Officers scoured swamps and hillsides, their search area shrinking with every hour. Sweat had lost his partner, but he hadn't lost his will to escape. The death of Richard Matt changed everything. For weeks, 2 killers haunted the Adirondacks. Now, only one remained. Some residents felt relief. Others felt greater fear. Sweat was younger, more cunning, and no longer slowed by Matt's recklessness. It was like chasing a shadow, but a shadow that killed once before and could kill again. The lesson was stark. Survival favors patience. Sweat had it. Matt did not. And now, as the manhunt entered its final hours, all eyes turned to one question. How far would David Sweat go to stay free? June 28, 2015. The 23rd day of the manhunt. Richard Matt was dead, but his partner, David Sweat, was still out there, a ghost in the forest. The search grid had tightened to just a few square miles. Helicopters scanned fields. Officers combed swamps. Every farmhouse door was checked, and yet Sweat remained unseen. But on this day, fate would place him on a country road and in the crosshairs of a lone officer. This was the end game. And David Sweat wasn't going quietly. What happened next was a chase so sudden, so raw, it shocked even the officers who lived it. By the final week of June, the manhunt had consumed millions of dollars and thousands of man-hours. Search teams were rotating in shifts, exhausted, blistered, but relentless. The evidence was clear. Sweat was alive. He left behind tracks, broken branches, and discarded wrappers. But he was running out of space. The forest that once hid him was now surrounded. The escape that had humiliated the prison system was nearing its last chapter. All that was missing was the man himself. And then, one trooper saw movement. Sergeant J. Cook, a 21-year veteran of the New York State Police, was patrolling alone near Constable, New York, just a few miles from the Canadian border. It was quiet, empty, and then he saw him. A man, walking along a country road, head down, clothes dirty, backpack slung over his shoulder. The face was unmistakable, David Sweat. Cook stepped from his vehicle. He called out, and Sweat ran. The final chase had begun. David Sweat bolted into the open field, sprinting toward the tree line. He was fast, younger than Matt, younger than most officers. For a moment, it seemed he might slip away once again. But Sergeant Cook knew what was at stake. If Sweat reached the trees, the hunt would start all over again. More days, more danger. Cook raised his service rifle. He fired once. Sweat staggered. He fired again. The bullet struck Sweat in the torso. The fugitive collapsed, blood soaking into the grass. After 23 days, the escape at Dannemora was over. But Sweat wasn't dead. David Sweat was rushed to Albany Medical Center under heavy guard. He survived. For investigators, the capture meant answers. They wanted to know, how had the escape worked? Who had helped? How close had the killers come to freedom? Sweat talked. He admitted the truth. Richard Matt had grown reckless, slowing them down. He confirmed what investigators suspected. Prison worker Joyce Mitchell was supposed to pick them up, but panicked. He even bragged about their plan to head to Mexico. But his capture also left a deeper scar, because Sweat's survival forced everyone to face the flaws in a system that had sworn this could never happen. And that truth would cut deeper than the escape itself. The escape at Dannemora wasn't just a story of two killers on the run. It was a story about trust and how it can be broken. A prison guard's friendship became a weapon. A system built to contain the dangerous proved fragile. An entire community learned how quickly safety can vanish. Richard Matt paid with his life. David Sweat with a lifetime behind bars. Joyce Mitchell with prison time of her own. But for the people in northern New York, the scar never fully healed. For 23 days, fear ruled their lives. And the question still lingers. If it happened once, could it happen again? This was the story of the escape at Dannemora. From the tunnels beneath Clinton Correctional to the forests of the Adirondacks, it was a story of desperation, fear, and survival. But beyond the manhunt, it was a reminder. Freedom and safety are fragile things. If this story gripped you, subscribe, share, and leave your thoughts below. Join us again here at the Mysterious Crime Box for more mysteries await inside the crime box.